Well, this is Dave Gaddis, and today we're interviewing John Lettelleir, and here in his office in Frisco. This is the 10th of February, 2015. So welcome, John.
Thank you, Dave.
So why don't we start at the beginning and tell us when and where you were born.
I was born in Shelbyville, Indiana,
Okay.
back in 1959,
And what did your parents do that had you in Shelbyville?
well, Dad was actually born and raised in Bloomington, Indiana, and when the Depression hit, his dad was in the bakery business at IU, and he hired some college workers. One was Hoagie Carmichael, who wrote Moon River, but they migrated to Shelbyville, and then he went off to the South Pacific to fight World War II, got malaria, and so when he came back after the war, he was working as a truck driver, and then met my mom on a blind date in Tyler, Texas. She was born and raised in East Texas, and a few months later they got married, but Dad had a relapse of malaria, and so they told him he couldn't live in the South, and so he moved back up north, and so they did that back in the late 40s, and so that's how I came to where I grew up at.
So did you stay in Shelbyville your whole childhood?
Yes.
Okay. And then where did you go to college?
College, Indiana State.
Okay. And why did you pick Indiana State?
Just, at first I wanted to be a teacher, but also looking at architecture at the same time. And actually went to a junior college just before Indiana State. Okay. And first day of class, the teacher said, to be an architect, you got to be prepared to sit behind the desk for hours on end. And I thought, after about several years of studying civil engineering and architecture, drawing, I decided that's not what I wanted to be. So I started to shift majors a few times, and then went up to Indiana State. And in one class, how I got into planning was the teacher in this one class had broke the students out into groups and do a little bit of explanation between each one. What are you doing? Why are you in the class, and so forth? And this one gentleman explained that he was in urban regional studies, and I go, what's that about? And so he explained it to me. I said, hey, that's interesting. So I gave him the name of the professor. It was Dr. Barton, and I set up an appointment with him and went and visited, found out some more information, and decided to make the change into urban regional studies, and been a good decision.
Okay. And you had a minor in geology?
Minor in geology.
So were you interested in geology? Or?
At one time I was interested in geology, but I did learn a few things in geology that applied to planning. So, knowing about soil mechanics and where to find certain information as it impacts development. So it wasn't a waste, so it has benefited me in my career.
Okay. So Indiana State didn't have a planning program per se, so the urban studies.
That's right.
Basically, okay. So you graduate from college, where did you go next?
Next, after graduating one Saturday, we got married the next Saturday. Next Saturday after that, we moved to Texas. No place to live or anything, but we knew we was coming to Dallas because my wife was accepted at SMU Law School. Okay. But I was fulfilling a childhood dream. I decided when I was about 7, I was going to move to Texas because we used to come down and visit the relatives in East Texas, and so I decided I was moving to Texas at some point. Made the move. Wife was comfortable with that, and so Dallas is where we established our roots. And then about a year after we moved down, because I was trying to get a job in planning at that time. That was back in 1982. But I was competing with people that had masters and experience for entry-level positions in planning, and I wanted to work in planning for a couple years before starting graduate work. Didn't turn out that way, so a year later I went to graduate school, and actually it worked out best. I was able to complete it within about a 2.5 year time frame, and then get my first full-time job in planning. So it was best that got the graduate work out of the way before working full-time, because that is a challenge, trying to do graduate work and working full-time.
Okay. So where did you go to graduate school?
University of Texas at Arlington.
And why did you pick them?
They were the only planning school that I was really interested in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, that I felt would serve my needs, well connected within the community. And from talking to other planners, a lot of planners have gone to UTA, so I focused in on UTA.
Okay, this was the early 80s?
Early 80s, and so I guess it's about 1983 is when I started the program.
Okay. And is this when it had already split off into SUPA, or was it still in the architecture school?
It had split off.
Okay. Remember some of the professors?
Yes, it was Joel Goldstein,
Okay.
Art Angiamani, who's still there today. I think those are the only two that are left from then. Of course, Joel, he passed away several years ago,
Okay.
but once in a while I'll visit with Art.
Okay. And how about some of your classmates?
Classmates, after graduating and start going all different ways, it's really haven't kept in touch with a lot of the graduate students.
Okay. So you got your master's degree, so you're ready to go to work in the field, so where did you go?
First place was the city of Grand Prairie,
Okay, and what was your position?
planner.
Okay, planner one or just
I think it was planner one was
Okay.
position.
And what kinds of things were you doing?
In that position, it was reviewing plats, site plans, zoning cases, text amendments to zoning cases.
Okay. You remember who your supervisor was or who the planning director was?
Planning director was Roger Hedrick,
Okay.
and try to remember the planning manager. Steve was his first name. I can't remember his last name, but I learned a lot from both gentlemen.
Okay. And so how long did you stay in Grand Prairie?
I was there about 2 years.
Okay. And then where'd you go?
Well, there was a job posting for Plano, Texas,
Okay.
and I know Plano was growing, and put my name in the hat and went up and interviewed and got called back for a second interview and got the job, and that turned out to be a real good opportunity working in Plano.
Okay. What kinds of things were you doing in Plano?
The same thing, zoning cases, and actually more zoning cases, text amendments to like the comp plan, zoning ordinance, but difference like between the Grand Prairie and Plano, there was a lot more activity that was taking place in Plano, and so more opportunities to learn things. And in working in both of those cities, it helped me to get prepared for this job here, because I saw two different ways how cities went about planning. One was more proactive, one was a little more reactive, and so it's a good opportunity.
Okay, I'll put you on the spot.
Okay.
Which is which? Which city was proactive, which city was reactive?
Well, the Grand Prairie tended to be a little more political, and changed with the political seasons at the time there. So that made it a little more challenging of trying to carry out the plans. And whereas Plano had more of a consistent leadership. And I remember when I started in Plano, like the council, they've joked around with one another, but they shared a common vision going forward. So, Plano was a place to learn more about planning.
Okay, and who was the planning director, and who did you work for in Plano?
That was Frank Turner.
Okay. And who was the city manager at the time, do you recall?
Tom Muhlenbeck.
Okay. Tom was there for a long time as well.
He was there. Tom arrived probably about a year before I got there. Arrived in Plano in 1998, and I think he was hired in late 1987.
Okay. And Frank's been there a long time too, so.
And still there.
Still there.
The years are piling up.
Okay. Any other staff members to Plano that you remember?
Phyllis Gerald,
Okay.
a lot of respect for her. As for, I don't think there's anyone left in the planning division since I left. That was
Not just the
about
people that
17
left.
years ago.
I mean, if there are other people that were there that have gone on to other things.
Well, there's Tim Dolan that worked there, and of course, Tim passed away a few years ago in a traffic accident. Mark Sweeney came in, and so once in a while we'll see him at planning conferences. Shara Sefco, she was a planner there, so I interact with her, and of course Dan Sefco had worked in Plano. There was a couple years in between when I came on and when he left, and so, but I interact a lot with Dan. Dan's been involved with as a consultant on several of our ordinances here in Frisco.
Any major projects that you worked on in Plano that you're particularly proud of?
A couple actually, and it has influenced me today as far as piquing my interest. But one was the Legacy Town Center, and so I was appointed to work with the consultant team on that project, and so it was a lot to learn. It was totally different from traditional planning, which had been separating the land uses, retail at the corner and single family around, and don't let the two meet and put up screen walls and so forth. So this is all new about mixing the land uses together. And just before then, there was a zoning case. I remember the zoning case today. My staff gets tired of me saying this, but there was a paradigm shift in my thinking. It was down Plano, zoning case 97-01, and it was talking about mixed use, and it was at basically Preston and 121. Now, I remember Frank bringing in people, EDS brought in people to talk about mixed use, and the time multifamily was a bad term, and it was pushback. And one time we had a tour with the Planning and Zoning Commission down in Uptown, and Janet Stovall was the chairperson of P&Z at that time, and she asked this one question in this one spot at the right time that changed the whole discussion. And she asked, it was Art Lomanick with Columbus Realty, she asked, how many units are in this building? And he goes, it's 80 units to the acre. Eyes get wide, and then he goes, and we have as much parking in our garage than we do in the surface parking right across the street, which was a quadrangle. That one question changed the discussion, and it led to other mixed-use developments happening in Plano. Eastside Transit Village, and of course with the shops at Legacy has been successful, and now what was considered to be taboo in Plano, now they have more, accepted mixed-use developments today than they did prior to then.
Okay. So when did you leave Plano?
Left there in late 1998.
And so why did you leave?
Opportunity. It was a chance to be part of a growing community, and it was a challenge. And I would say a reservation I had was being involved with the Shops at Legacy project. That was a unique project that hated to pass on, but about a year and a half later, the Frisco Square project came about, and so satisfied the need, and we've done several mixed-use projects since then. But it's been a great opportunity to be able to take what I've learned from Plano and Grand Prairie and apply that knowledge here, so when the communities north of Frisco grow, they can look at Frisco and say, this is what worked and this is what John recommended didn't work, so we don't want to repeat it. So,
you recall what the population of Frisco was when you started?
Population was about 24,000.
Okay, and what's the current population?
It's over 145,000. And this one little tidbit of information, the 1991 Comprehensive Plan had a population projection on the high growth side that Frisco would reach 24,000 in the year 2020. So, of course, that 2020 came early.
Well, speaking of comprehensive plans, have you had the same plan the whole time, or have you done a number of different plans over the years?
We're working on our third plan.
Okay.
When I was hired here, I was given 4 tasks to get done in 2 years, and one of those was updating the comprehensive plan. The previous one, as I mentioned earlier, was done in 1991, and so we hired PGAL. Joe Pubner was the project manager for that, did a superb job, and that was adopted in 2000, and Texas APA awarded us the best comp plan that year, so that felt really good, being this first job as a director and getting the comp plan. And so this community has really rallied behind comprehensive planning. It's been really strong here. I think one of the strong points is we get a lot of people moving in from different parts of the country that understands mixed use and so forth. But from the 2000, then we updated it in 2006, and then we would have updated this or started the process probably about 4 years ago, but since we're going through the recession, council had asked all the departments, what do you absolutely need, and those put the comprehensive plan on the back burner for the time, and then when the economy got better, we started back up. But we're having our public hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting tonight, and hopefully they'll recommend approval and take this before City Council in March. So
Okay.
this will be the third one. And
Did you have a consultant on this last one?
yes, and that has been Jacobs, has been the lead consultant, and of course they have several sub-consultants working for them.
Okay. Well, part of that massive growth has been a lot of developments in town. You want to talk about some of them? You mentioned Frisco Square and some of the areas out west.
Yeah, with Frisco Square being one mixed-use development, and then we have the ballpark, which is a AA ballpark. You have the Frisco Rough Riders, which is an affiliate with the Texas Rangers. They opened up, I think, about 2003. So when you go out to the ballpark, out in right field, we left it open so you have urban living units looking down into the ball field. So we're trying to replicate the Chicago Wrigley Field. And you have the same thing with more urban living units being built across from left field, so they'll be able to look in there. And then we'll have office and hotel that will finish wrapping the development. So that's been a great development. And then what's known as Frisco Bridges, that's where we have Stonebriar Mall and IKEA, and we have the ballpark. The development along Parkwood's been a little bit slow. The city, the Frisco Economic Development Corporation, has been trying to lure retailers back on Parkwood, but they want to be out on to Preston or 121. So it was probably about 2004, pitched the idea of, hey, to council, how would you feel about doing residential there? Because if we know retail doesn't want to be back there, could we look for another use and make this area more active? We have this one area called Central Park. It's a park based on the Shawnee Cattle Trail Drive. So if you ever get a chance to go there, it has a lot of cowboys saying, it has hero-size longhorns, cowboy on horseback. It has 2 wells to represent. This was the stopping point or a resting point for the Shawnee Cattle Trail Drive for the cattle to take in water. But we have this beautiful amenity, but people didn't know that it was there. So long-term vision, let's introduce residential back there. Let's get this area more active, because after 9 o'clock when the retail shut down, it was dead back there. And in fact, at one time we had graffiti on all that artwork because out of place. I mean, it's just, no one was down there at night. So, but 2005, and then about 2007, we got our first urban living. It was Post Properties. Then Westwood came in and did Cool Springs 1 and 2. Amley did the urban living units wrapped around the ballpark. We got another area going in. The restaurants down in those areas have been very supportive of these because I said the business has picked up. You go down there in the evening or in the morning, you see people out jogging, so the area is taking more on life out of more hours of the day. So it's coming together.
Okay.
Now, you have that. Of course, we have what's called the Multipurpose Event Center, or aka known as the Dallas Cowboys headquarters and practice facility, under construction there at D&T and Warren. That is scheduled to be open in summer of 2016. And so the Cowboys, per the contract, is required to have a minimum of 1 week of training before the season starts. So that'll be great. And part of that has also triggered a kind of like an event center with restaurants just happening in between Warren Parkway and the Cowboys facility. And then wrapping around that is we're having a work session tonight to talk about Frisco Station. And that is another mixed-use development. We're talking to a future couple of Fortune 100 companies about locating there, but it's based on a healthy initiative, but have urban living, open space, hike and bike trails. And then just north of that, we're talking about to a Dubai group who's also looking to do mixed use. And then just right across the street, Wade Park, another mixed use development. Is Stan Thomas out of Atlanta is doing a mixed use development on that property. Includes Whole Foods, office, and so forth. So a lot of mixed use developments right along the D&T from Lebanon going south towards 121.
And it's been well received by the community. You didn't get the pushback like you got in Legacy Town Center?
No, there are some people who have questions about urban living. They wonder about the impact that it's going to have on the school district. We've done a great amount of research to show that the urban living does not have the same impact that it does like garden style apartments. And I think most people are familiar with on a garden style. When I say garden style, generally about 15, 20 units to the acre. After about 10 years, you tend to have more children coming out of those projects as they age. The rents tend to go down and so forth. But with the urban living, and what we require here in Frisco, you have to do structured parking. And in looking at the land values of the urban living, and just give you a little bit of history on that, they're generally around about 5 to 6 million per acre. Garden style is about 1.25 million per acre. A single family development may be from like a 0.8 million to maybe a 1.6 million. And then looking how the number of children come out of those facilities, we looked at projects older than 10 years and looking at Uptown and other areas and talking to developers across the nation on their experience. And we show that it's actually a low number that comes out of the urban living. Mainly they don't provide family amenities. It's geared towards really empty nesters.
Now,
So,
having said that, we've been building lots of schools here in Frisco.
yes, we have.
And that's just to serve all the regular suburban development that's going around the...
That's right.
Okay.
When I started here in '98, there was one high school, and I think there's 7 today, and they're building 8. Building number 8 right now.
And it seems to have been an economic strategy to go after sports as kind of a development?
Yes, it has been. So we have representation with the Cowboys coming from all the major sports. We have the Dallas Stars headquarters and practice facilities here in Frisco. We have the Texas Legends, part of the D League of the NBA, or the Dallas Mavericks. So I mentioned earlier, we have the Frisco Rough Riders, affiliate of the Texas Rangers, and then the Cowboys coming.
Okay. Well, we've kind of hit a little bit on APA and planning. Do you remember when you first got involved in APA?
APA, probably more or less when I got to Plano. Frank Turner was a big supporter of APA, and so that's when I got the taste of getting involved with APA at that time, and then just steadily built over time.
Okay. Do you remember what when did you first get involved? Did you get involved as a section officer, or did you?
Well, David Hoover was the one that convinced me to get involved at the section level. I can't remember.
When he was at Allen?
Yes, with the city of Allen. He says, hey, are you interested in being the, like assistant director? And I'm kind of like, well, what's involved and so forth. And so I said, why not? And so did the director. And yeah, if I look back, I probably would have gone back and changed a few things, but did I do the best job? I always think I can do a better job. So I was involved with that, and then I think it was Phyllis Gerald that reached out to me and says, hey, are you interested in running for TML representative? I don't know what's involved and so forth. So I did that. But that was a great opportunity, though.
And this is after CPAT had been absorbed?
That's right.
So.
I'm trying to remember when CPAT went away. I remember being a member of that when I was in Plano, and I think, at what point it went away, I don't remember the year for that.
And so by being the TML rep, you were in charge of the chapter policy committees, and you followed legislation, and you recall any particular legislative battles while you were doing that, or?
None in particular. It's just really making sure that the state wasn't eroding local rights. That's always been a challenge, and it's like what's going through the 2015 legislature, and as they talk about budget cap or appraisal caps. I mean, that can be devastating to a growing community. But trying to make sure zoning doesn't become vesting, and making sure the rules are fair to all.
Well, how about AICP? Do you remember when you took the AICP exam?
Took that probably, I won't say 1987, 1988. Okay. One of those 2 years. Okay. Passed it on the first time, okay. So that's good. And then I had to get a few years of experience. I think some things have changed where you got to have more experience now before you take the AICP. So I remember Phyllis saying, hey, you need to complete the paperwork, get it done, and I finally got that done and got the full AICP.
Okay. How about some other organizations that you may be involved with, like maybe the Greater Dallas Planning Council? Or?
Yes, involved with the Greater Dallas Planning Council, being a member of that for a few years, and then also on their board.
And why don't you explain a little bit about what that organization is about?
Well, Greater Dallas Planning Council is trying to get representation throughout the region to focus on planning development issues that affects the region, of trying to be an umbrella, of putting policy statements together, of taking the lead, like serving as a co-chair on like green engineering. Is how can we take these, like I'll use the example, San Antonio Riverwalk. Instead of putting that in a pipe, how can you turn that into amenity? So we're having a lot of discussions on that, working on a tour right now. I think it's Mike Grace that's done a lot of the legwork, but we're planning a tour later this fall to go down and visit Houston to look what they've done on their bayou, Buffalo Bayou, and a couple other projects. So, with that, it's looking for those examples out there, people, what have they learned, what can they do different, how can we apply that to this area. The Greater Dallas Planning Council also has subcommittees like working on transportation, water, education. So basically it comes down to how can we make this region better, more attractive, and resilient in the long run.
Any other professional organizations?
Urban Land Institute. Okay. That's been a great organization to be a part of. I became a member of them probably about 2000. Went to several of their conferences, and I have learned a lot from the Urban Land Institute. I would say they probably did a really good job, and I think the APA is caught up with that, but the Urban Land Institute was like touching upon multi disciplines, and bring those together to formulate policy or make recommendations. And I think I don't see them as making, I'm trying to think of the word of, trying to make more of an informed decision. So they've done a good job. Besides that, the Congress on New Urbanism has been great. Attended several of their conferences, and again, joining these other organizations, I'm always after is trying to learn as much as I possibly can, and then how do you bring it back to Frisco to say, this is what we're doing right, this is what we could change to be even better. So constantly looking for nuggets of information.
Okay. So has Frisco adopted the form-based code? Or?
We have a hybrid of form-based code. So if you talk to the purists, they criticize Frisco, but for a planner, I think it's always, there's not a perfect system out there. Zoning's not perfect, there's no transportation codes perfect, whatever. It's taking that information that's out there and boiling it down and tailoring it to the community is what's going to work best for the community. So you take one code that may work in community A and then try to apply that to B, it may not work for a number of reasons. So it's just like when you go to a tailor to get fitted for a suit, the same suit doesn't fit everybody. So you got to find the one. You got to have it tailored here and there to make it look the best you possibly can.
Okay. Beyond professional organizations, or what do you do in your free time?
Free time, well, I drive my family nuts when we go on vacation because I'm always going out there looking for ideas. I'm looking at architecture. I go into old downtowns. Why can I glean from this to bring back to Frisco, looking at developments when I go to conferences, like to get there a day early, go around touring. For an example, with the National APA in Atlanta last year, I was reading in the planning magazine several items that talk about Fourth Ward Park, and it's a regional retention, but it's a park. And so I was like, I'm gonna go visit that. And sure enough, that wowed me, and so I took a lot of pictures. And when I mentioned Frisco Station, when we were having a charrette last summer about ideas for the property, I proposed that. I said, hey, look at this. This would be great because they're going to have regional retention at one end of their property. So they're incorporating that in the design. So excellent. But yes, when I'm on vacation, I don't turn it off. I'm constantly going around just looking for ideas, plazas, open spaces, architectural elements, talk to other cities. What are you doing? What's your challenges and so forth. The other is reading. It's split between reading professional books, the planning, as well as management books. So. And then the other, finding time is exercising.
Okay. You have kids?
I have one son.
Okay. Is he going to be another planner? Or?
No, I don't know. He's trying to find his way. He's like me. He's changing his profession a couple times in college, and like what he's want to be. And speaking from experience, when you're about 17 or 18, I think it's rare that you know what you want to be. Now, my wife, she knew what she wanted to be when she was 6 years old. She wanted to be an attorney, and that's what she is, and very good at her craft. But like for me, it's kind of like I just had to shift around, and same thing with him. But I always tell him, whatever you do, you're always going to learn something. Just keep an open mind.
Well, looking back on your career, you mentioned Frank and Phyllis as mentors. I guess maybe Ard Anjamani might be one of those too. Yeah,
Ard, and there was another gentleman over at UT Arlington. His name was Felix. I'm trying to remember his last name. He was only there for like a short time, but he had traveled the world, and he had the opportunity to work for an international consultant, but he decided to teach for a little bit and learned a lot from him. So when I look at people that had an impact on my life that I carry forward today, Dr. Barton at Indiana State, learned a lot from him because he had worked in the private sector before he came into academia. So he had a lot of stories to tell about, keep this in mind, don't get bureaucratic, take a common sense approach. And I've kept that in mind. And then, of course, working with Frank and Phyllis longer in my planning career before I came here had a lot of influence. I mean, one time Frank telling the story about when you work for a city, you have a lot of power. And then, you know, with that, you got to come across trying to work with individuals. So I use the examples like when you're shopping for a new TV, to show how old this is, you know, you could go to Circuit City, which you don't have them around anymore, or Best Buy, or, you know, Montgomery Ward, or whatever, and shop for the best price. But when you go to a city, I mean, there's only one city you can go to. So I've kept that in mind as, you know, trying to keep an open mind when somebody comes in with an idea and, you know, see how it works with the comp plan. Sometimes you say, hey, let's give it a try. And other times you say, it's absolutely not going to work here. So.
How about any people that you may have mentored? Any proteges that you're particularly proud of?
There's been a number of people that have gone through. Others have become planning directors in other cities, and, you know, they've done well. You know, they come back and says, hey, you've had a lot of influence on me, and, you know, I don't know what to say about that. It's when I mentor people, I try to, so, you know, don't ever draw that line in the sand too quickly. Always listen to both sides, and always try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Because when you come up with an idea, sometimes come up with a couple of different variations. Because when you come up with one idea, you get married to that idea, and you take it very personally if other people don't jump on board with it. But when you look at different variables or different alternatives to that idea, it opens yourself to more possibilities that you may not have considered before. And then also try to mentor people, just say sometimes it's not the best opportunity, or you got to look for those opportunities to plant the seed. But you plant the seed, and maybe a couple of years later it is germinated and you can do something else. But everything has its time. You just got to learn not to push too hard. I've learned that. And I'll also learn, well, sometimes when you do push too hard, you get burnt. And always step back and learn from your failures. There's nothing wrong about failing. Unless you repeat it a second time, then it could be catastrophic. But otherwise, learn from the failures and improve.
So that'd be your advice to a young planner, or do you have other things that you would recommend to somebody just right out of school?
That would be my advice. And going back to the, you know, when you ask about form-based codes, just remember as a planner, what you may see in another community that may work for them, just remember you got to tailor it for your community. And if there's one thing coming here, if known what I know now and could change, I probably would try to reach out to more of creating that vision for the city and getting people involved in the community and involved in the process. That's always a challenge on the comprehensive plan. Each time we've updated it, I always think, okay, we need to do this better, and so each time we've got more people involved in the process. But creating that vision so that city leadership is comfortable. Because the city leadership, I mean, talking about city council and planning and zoning commission, they hear from people that is either supportive or they're against it. Mostly people that are against it, and trying to discern of what's important and not. But if you have a clear vision and you get people behind it, it helps to implement what you're trying to do from the comprehensive plan. So it's like anybody going to maybe a grown city or to a new city, and to start off is probably try to get a pulse of the community, and updating the comprehensive plan is a good first step.
Well, we've covered a lot of territory today. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
Can't think of anything.
Okay.
I mean, it's a lot of information up there. It's, of course, getting ready for tonight, and so tonight be a big meeting. So,
You expect a lot of controversy tonight?
we'll probably have a few people that will come out. Anything to deal with change, people resist change, but always remind people that are resist change. It's the only thing that got us here. Change is constantly happening, but it's explaining that. It's just going through the facts. Just like we had a meeting with a group last week, and they had concerns about the comprehensive plan, but it was having a specific meeting to address their concerns. And after we went through, they said, we understand where you're coming from. We have a better understanding of the planning. We may not necessarily agree on everything, but we feel more comfortable with the comprehensive plan. So having those one-on-one meetings go a long way.
One of the problems that sometimes occurs in a fast-growing community is you've got the old 25,000 population, and how they react to all those 100,000 people that moved in after them. Has Frisco been able to balance that, or?
That came to a head probably around about 2000, 2001. Happened a little bit sooner than I had anticipated. You really don't have that discussion of the old guard, new guard. Most people understand that the city is growing, and what they want at the end of the day is quality. Got to tell you this one story, and it has helped. There was back in 2000, had 2 new council members elected, and they were Mike Simpson and Mayor Mosso. And the importance of those 2 names, they later became mayors. Mike Simpson, he termed out as mayor, and Mayor Mosso is mayor today. And when we're doing the zoning case for Frisco Square, they came in and says, John, we can't support this case. I mean, it has multifamily in it. And so I sat down with them individually and walked them through, here's the difference of, this is the type of multifamily we're talking about in Frisco Square. You have the structured parking, it's wrapped and so forth. It's a whole different environment, and just called out a few examples. And what's also beneficial, they're world travelers, so they're seen in different areas. So, got them to our comfort level. So when the zoning case came up, Frisco Square, it was unanimously approved. But having that discussion with those 2, and then meeting with the council members and other planning and zoning commissioners, I would send them articles, just educate them on mixed use, bad and the good. But that has helped to build the base for doing mixed use within the city of Frisco. But those 2 discussions, unbeknownst to me that they would later became mayors, they've been big supporters of planning and council, as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission. If it wasn't for them, pushing planning, we probably wouldn't have had the success that we have. And when I was fortunate enough to be hired here, the council at that time knew that growth was coming. They said, how do we prepare for the growth? And city leadership has been very supportive of planning, allowing me to grow the department to meet the demand and to do these comprehensive plans and other plans to support the growth. That doesn't happen in every city.
And certainly not as well as it's happened here. So with that, I want to thank you for spending some time with us. Thank you very
Glad to
much.
do it. Thank you.